Welcome to the Jboy Show, hosted by Jake Crain, the fastest growing sports show in the nation.
I'm Coach Hugh Freeze.
This is Super Bowl champion Brandon Graham.
Hey, this is DJ Shockley, and you're watching.
And thanks for watching the Jboy Show.
Hey, thanks for hopping in, everybody, on this beautiful Tuesday. Hopefully it's beautiful where you are, whether you're listening morning, noon, afternoon, evening, night, nightcap, doesn't matter. We appreciate you joining us. Excited to bring in the guy who broke the Texas and Oklahoma news about the interest in the SEC, the reaching out, Houston Chronicle and Texas A&M reporter Brent Zwernamen. Really excited to get him in here. But first, I do got to shout out betonline.ag. Head over there today. We got Major League Baseball, soccer, Olympics, anything that you can bet on. BetOnline.ag is not only going to have it, they're going to play the Sharps. They're going to play it early. You guys know during the season, we are going to dominate, all right, college football betting spreads. Y'all know me. Last year, we dominated. The NCAA tournament dominated. Called Medina Spirit, called Pete Alonso. Shout out to the Polar Bear for coming through like an Amazon truck. But BetOnline is where to go. And the craziest thing is, and I'll say it and I'll say it again, and I have to say it, but I'll say it again. If you go there now and you sign up, doesn't matter, desktop, mobile, regardless, you get a 50% welcome sign-up bonus. That is a 50% welcome sign-up bonus. So go to betonline.ag today. Go check them out. They got some great stuff over there. My monologue before we get to Brent from the Houston Chronicle and Texas A&M beat writer. There's some things going on that are parallel that I think everybody should know about because we're hearing, Texas, Oklahoma, it's a done deal. They're not renewing in 24 and 25. So that means it ends in 2023. Remember the year 2023 because there's a lot that's revolving around this. We have the expansion of the playoff. Oh, and just so happens that the CBS and the SEC contract is up in 2023. So Texas and Oklahoma are leaving the Big 12 in 2023. The playoff expands in 2023. We have NIL, we have wagering, and we have CBS and the SEC contract ending in 2023. That is not a coincidence. What you are going to see happen is very simple. The SEC will add Texas and they'll add Oklahoma, and CBS is going to be, they're out. All right, they're going to be out at this point. It will be Disney, ESPN, ESPN Plus, and the SEC network. So you say, how are they going to juice this up? Well, right now I believe that the last contract was $7 billion for the SEC. I wouldn't be shocked if this one was double that. I would not be shocked if this one was $14 billion. You're already in the Texas market, but now you add the brand school of Texas. Obviously, regardless of what you say, Texas is the state school. You add an Oklahoma market as well. We all know the money that's out there. I mean, just look at what T. Boone Pickens has done at Oklahoma State and the cathedral they've built out there. But a lot of things are running parallel and they're coming to a head. And what I firmly believe you will see is that if you're, and let's just say you're an Alabama fan, I think each SEC school will have an individual ESPN Plus channel where if you want to watch baseball games, women's volleyball, whatever, equestrian, Quidditch, doesn't matter. You are going to have to go to ESPN Plus to be able to watch that. Very similar now to if you want to watch, Auburn versus Akron in the first week. The games that maybe aren't marquee or maybe some sports that aren't as big as football and basketball. I think you'll see a ton of college baseball on there, obviously, especially early. But you mix that with the SEC network. You have the SEC alternate channel. All right. And it's all run through ESPN and Disney, which just so happens to own ABC as well. So it's all coming to a head. I don't think this is a coincidence at all. 2023 is a huge year. This is the year they sat down and said, all right, this is when all the changes are going to happen. This is when we can put it together because they are about to juice up ESPN Plus. They're going to juice up the SEC network even more, double the profit for each school. And I just think it's heading that way. So there's a little insight into what's going on. You add that to the college football playoff expanding to 12. 2023 is a huge year in the landscape of college football. Maybe the biggest year ever. The biggest year ever since they invented the forward pass. I don't know. Or whatever. And then somebody finally told Kentucky this year they can throw it forward. But that's something I just want to give you guys a little insight behind there. We got Brent Zwernamen coming on. It's a great conversation. The guy who broke the story, and it's still evolving. So there's a lot more going on. You know the only place you can win the water cooler is here. So let's get after it. Hello, everybody. As promised, we have the Houston Chronicle's Brent Zwernamen here. Brent, I appreciate you joining us, man. I know it's been crazy for you after you broke that Texas-Oklahoma story. Number one, are you all right? And are you doing this from a bunker somewhere in an undisclosed location?
Yeah, undisclosed location of Bryan College Station, Texas. I'm back from SEC media days, but I literally had to pull a bungee cord from the bookcase to the door of my office / game room to keep 3 little kids out. So yeah, nice. So I told my boss, I said, I got a lot more done in Hoover, Alabama at the circus of its SEC media days. I'm here, but I'm back at it, and things haven't slowed down. Imagine that, even though I'm back here in the quiet confines of Bryan College Station.
Yeah, and this dropped like a bomb. I was at media days as well. They're on Radio Row, and it hits at a certain time when a certain coach from a certain school, they're a little close to you in College Station, is talking. And how surprised were you, Brennan? Again, you were the guy that broke it, but when you got this information, looking at it and then saying, "Wow, this is legitimate," before you even put it out, I'm sure even you were like, "Man, this is wild."
Yeah, and I'll say this, it's a good lesson for young journalists out there. This all stemmed from me doing the research and getting back in touch with old longtime contacts to do a 10-year anniversary story on Bowen Lofton. 10 years ago on July 21st, 2011, he stepped out of a regents meeting and he said, the Big 12 is in a state of uncertainty. And that was my introduction really to Twitter, because I sat down and tweeted that and it took off like crazy. So I had gotten back in touch with a lot of those old folks, crossing leagues to visit with them about the 10-year anniversary of A&M not going into the SEC, but announcing that it was going into the SEC. And it stemmed from that. And I will say this, man, it was coincidental, because if you might have seen me scrambling around. I had a laptop in one hand and my cell phone in the other, and trying to find Wi-Fi and then trying to get on my hotspot. It actually was supposed to come out earlier, but I couldn't. I was having trouble with all those connections and everything like that. So the timing of Jimbo and crew being on hand, it was coincidental.
Wow.
I said, my mom always said the big man has a sense of humor. That was one of those cases, because then, there was, Ross Bjork, the athletic director, was on hand. And so I asked him about it later. I said, hey, have you been to these before? He said, yeah, I came to 3 of them with Ole Miss. So if you remember, he was about as caught off guard as anybody else around there at that time. So ideally, it wouldn't have been on that day. Jimbo Fisher, Nick Saban, Mike Leach. That was going to be a great day regardless. But then on the flip side, I couldn't ignore that news when it was presented to me as well. I certainly wasn't going to ignore it and not chase it down.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if we're really living in the Matrix or not, with it being dropped just coincidentally there when Jimbo's talking. But, one thing about the story, Brent, that I find fascinating, that I understand A&M fans being upset about it. I understand A&M administrators being upset about it. This isn't something where they just called Texas and Oklahoma called the SEC that day and were like, hey, we want to leave the Big 12. This is something that has been going on. I mean, they've said upwards of 6 months. Wasn't there a gentleman's agreement, and it may have been before the Sankey regime. I'll let you clear that up, that if Texas or any of these people reached out, A&M would have to approve it, or it's null and void. Am I wrong in saying that?
Yeah, that dated back to Mike Slive a decade ago. And as we both know, things have changed so much. And Bowen Lofton has talked about that, how essentially Mike Slive told them at that time, it will be up to Texas A&M. They will have the final say if there's another school from the state. And he said that's kind of the agreement in place. And then, as Lofton said, Greg Sankey was aware of all that. The bottom line is, this is a different world.
Yeah,
even from a decade ago, with everything going on with the expanded playoffs, with the playoffs in particular, then the expanded playoffs, NIL, just on down the line, that things have changed. And you can't blame the SEC from its perspective.
No.
Saying, if you're going to add a couple of powerhouses, why not Texas and Oklahoma? And the way it was explained to me over the weekend, as I kind of continued following this story, is that the SEC has done this for a long time, worked behind the scenes. And the way the longtime league insider put it, the SEC couldn't get anything done if it included everyone in the talks, as opposed to just maybe being the commissioner and 1 or 2 key people to have those early visits and then move it forward. The idea on all of their ends was that this morning there was going to be that surprise letter to the Big 12, on Monday morning, saying that they were not going to renew their TV rights and so forth. Well, this kind of propelled things a little bit forward at that point and made the past few days a little more interesting.
Before you came on, I was talking about there's a lot of coincidences that are happening around 2023. You look at the SEC and the CBS deal becomes, it's over in 2023. the Big 12 and Texas and Oklahoma trying to leave in 2023, the expansion of the playoff in 2023. We have NIL and wagering in all this. When I look at that 2023 year, it seems like that's a kind of a marker that they're looking at to be able to make this move. From a time standpoint, Brent, when do you see Texas and Oklahoma actually officially joining the conference and being able to play SEC conference games?
As I explained to my boss, I feel like that class I took in realignment 10 years ago, very closely following Texas A&M and then Missouri, but obviously having the A&M discipline end of it. I'm versed in how all these things happen. And I remember with the Aggies, when that first came out, that they were leaving the Big 12 and going to the SEC, the idea was it wasn't going to happen for a couple of years. They were going to be a lame duck in the Big 12. It was really awkward from the very beginning. And then things started accelerating, saying the Big 12, and I know it's a different scenario this time, but the Big 12 at that time said, we don't want this lame duck program that doesn't want to be around here. Get them out of here. Within a year, and of course the Aggies couldn't wait to join the SEC. So within a year of Lofton's announcement that the Big 12 was in a state of uncertainty, A&M had joined the SEC. I could see things accelerating, certainly not to 2025. I mean, we've joked about, could you imagine 3 years from now, we're talking about Texas and OU going into their final season of Big 12 football? That ain't happening. So I think based on everything being public, based on the awkwardness of it all, that things will get accelerated. Now, it's more complicated, obviously, than back then with the Big 12 fighting for its life and so forth and trying to get as much money out of this as possible. But I do think it's good. 2023 for me would be the latest at this point. I could almost see 2022. Wow. The way, based on what I saw a decade ago and the way everything is negotiable, and they picked up the speed and they made it happen because the Big 12 didn't want these programs around that didn't want to be there, and those programs didn't want to be a part of that.
Brent, as well, being in College Station, breaking the news, having your finger on the pulse of the Aggie fan base, what are their thoughts about Texas and Oklahoma trying to come over and really copy them? And, like you were just talking, there is a precedent for it, so it may happen quick. What's the general consensus from Aggie fans? Because I could take a guess.
The initial reaction was a lot of anger. And even among I have so many Aggie friends and buddies, and I'm married an Aggie and all those things. But my little joke in response to them was that the angriest Aggies are also going to be the first ones in line for when the rivalry is renewed, talking about Longhorns versus Aggies in College Station and in Austin. So, yes, there's a lot of passion. There's a lot of anger. They wanted to be the only school in the SEC, but that's not going to happen. So I think they're going to come around to the idea, and that's going to be huge again to have. I grew up in this state and on this game, and it was massive in this state, talking about Texas versus Texas A&M in football. And that was what excited me most about the idea of the Longhorns, of them rejoining the league, because my thoughts were all along, they should have been playing it as a non-conference game. They should have. And now it's going to be a conference game. So, yes, A&M has come around, as you've noticed in the past couple of days. They've kind of changed, pivoted on their message and said that they welcome all newcomers. So, and then we'll look forward to playing them on the field of competition.
And I understand, at first being upset and because you kind of felt, lied to, or they kind of went behind your back in your own backyard to bring somebody. But I think you got to stay and fight, because listen, no longer can Texas ever say that A&M is little brother. You don't follow little brother around, and that's what they're doing. And listen, whether it's smart, not smart, it's a preemptive move to something else, I think, that's happening. I don't think that's a random coincidence either. But if I'm an Aggie fan, stay and fight. Let's fight it out then. Because right now, if you look at it, and this, Brent, A&M's personnel is better than Texas personnel. They really are right now, especially up front. So why don't you stay in there and beat up on their ass a little bit and let them come back and say whatever. Prove it on the field. Stay and fight. I'm with you.
Yeah, and I think they're coming around to that idea now, especially because they also don't want to just look like the big babies in the corner of the room and it suddenly be a 13-1 vote. I do believe in the end it's going to be a 14-0 vote, certainly based on everything they've said. With what you were just talking about, they don't want to be perceived nationally as a big bunch of crybabies and scared of this program, because they're not. They're not scared of them. The idea was that they wanted to be the lone SEC representative, the westernmost outpost of the SEC, the one in the Lone Star State. Well, that's not happening now. They also feel really good about having Jimbo Fisher and what he's put in place in a short amount of time. and they feel like they can own that series with the Longhorns early on. And of course, that would mean a big difference in recruiting as well with these programs going head to head.
We're here with Brent Zwernamen, covers A&M for the Houston Chronicle, does a great job, broke the Texas and Oklahoma story. You know, Brent, when you hear the other reports of, well, Clemson's been contacted, Florida State's been contacted, Ohio State and Michigan, is that something that you can see happening pretty fast? Is that legitimate, do you think? Because from what I've heard, there has been talks, and I'm sitting here thinking about the rivalries you could have in the SEC, Auburn and Bama, Ohio State, Michigan, Florida State, A&M, Texas, Oklahoma. I mean, just go down the list. And that's a super conference. Do you think that's something that could legitimately happen sooner than later, or is that just people talking because this Oklahoma and Texas deal is happening?
Yeah, it was my early impression that the SEC wanted to become that first 16-team super conference, and ideally at some point you would have 4 of those. And then along the way, in the past couple of days, you hear, well, they might add 4 more, or maybe 8 more, and get to 24. My little joke was, at some point we're going to have East versus West, 32 teams each. And those are going to be the names of the conferences. It certainly seems that's the direction we're headed. I haven't heard anything definitive past the 16. My personal preference would be that it would be, if they're going to do super conferences, that it would be 16 teams, because then it just seems like it almost just gets unwieldy if you're starting to talk about 20, 24, 32, and so forth. But yeah, I do believe they're trying to take it one step at a time with the addition of Oklahoma and Texas, and then go from there and figure out, and maybe you can help me out here, what the latest is on how they would divide that up. Would Alabama and Auburn go east? To me, that makes the most sense. You have 8 on each side geographically, and you add Oklahoma and Texas. And, people say, why don't the Longhorns and Sooners talk about the Big Ten or the ACC? I'm still one of those geography guys who thinks that makes common sense, that if you're going to, say, the Pac-12, you're flying over a desert for your minor sports to play, whereas if you're going to the SEC, you're crossing a river.
My last question for you, one of the biggest things out there that people have been, talking about is the Longhorn Network and how they fold into this picture. I mean, we talked about the CBS contract ending, and it seems to be a total ESPN and Disney show, SEC network. Is it something that you just see the SEC network absorbing the Longhorn Network? Because I seriously doubt that the Longhorn Network, at least the name, would survive if you're coming over to the SEC, because I don't think Greg Sankey and them would want to split that up.
Yeah, I think your key word early in that was fold.
Yeah.
That would fold it. It is also a way with ESPN involved in these talks for them to kind of unload that albatross, and essentially, and this is just my gut impressions. This is nothing I've heard otherwise, but that the idea that the Longhorn Network would then be absorbed into it, and you have all these really nice studios already in place in Austin, Texas, and essentially it becomes an outpost again of the SEC network and ESPN as well, but not formally the Longhorn Network, but certainly you have some really nice setup in place.
Yeah. Well, I keep saying the NFC, the AFC, and the SEC, those are the 3 professional leagues when you look at it, because it's going to be insane. But Brent, great stuff, man. Would love to have you on again as this story evolves. Congratulations on breaking it. Tell everybody where they can find your work. Tell everybody where they can find you on social media as well.
You bet. Best place is HoustonChronicle.com. And then just click on sports and college from there. And then at Brent Zwernamen, BrentZwernamen. And that's a tough one. So just, click on Google Brent Texas A&M Sports, and I bet you come up with it.
There it is. They make the copy and paste button for a reason, Brent. I really appreciate you coming on, brother. Great stuff. Like I said, we'll talk again. Appreciate you guys joining us. Subscribe, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Go to the jboyshow.com. Grab some of that merch. Had a great time talking to Brent Zwernamen from the Houston Chronicle. We'll be back soon. But for now, we're going. Like Texas and Oklahoma from the Big 12. We're gone.
The Jboy Show is produced by David Cohn, Technical Director Dave Hammock, Creative Director David Culbertson, Audio Engineer Feyzan Shareef, Production Assistants Blaine Crain and Kyle Orr, Executive Producers Jake Crain, Vince Thompson, Steve Chamberlain, and David Cohn. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website, thejboyshow.com, for updates regarding our newest apparel and merch designs. Win the water cooler with The Jboy Show.